Okay. So hi everybody. Welcome to the JSFoo Reboot Fest, and we have a very interesting topic today. That is, I think all of you guys might be working from home, working remotely. Even people who were not working remotely earlier have been forced to turn into remote teams. So today we are going to be talking about lean practices for remote teams. I'm Arnav. I'll be moderating this session, and just a very brief intro. I'm the co-founder of a software development bootcamp called Coding Blocks, where we teach people a lot of technologies like Android app development and web development and so on. And along with me today, the guest for this session today is Nikhil, who is the former CTO of Jombe, and he's a full stack developer. So I'd like to just hand over to Nikhil to introduce more about himself first, and then we will start talking about the topic for today. So yeah, Nikhil, we just like to tell a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Arnav. Hey everyone, my name is Nikhil Lanjevar. I identify as a full stack developer, and at the same time, I also work on conservation projects. I've been a full stack developer for about a decade now. Before, most of my times was spent in building this venture called Jombe. My experience with Jombe was that of leading the engineering teams, and for a good amount of time, to the end of my tenure, I've been a remote CTO to the company. After exiting business in 2017, I've been independently consulting and been a remote worker since then. So I've been remoting since 2013. It's been quite a while, and there's been some learnings which I would like to share today.
Great, awesome.
Great,
Um,
awesome. Um,
so,
so,
oh, I think
I
somebody is
think
having a little bit of
somebody is having
echo.
a little bit of echo.
Yeah, so I think one really interesting topic I'd like to start off with is what's in general your experience of trying to organize a team remotely. Just to give a brief introduction on your experience till now, particularly with this, and for smaller teams versus bigger teams, what practices work and say what practices don't, or like when somebody tries to use some kind of practices or processes from say a smaller team to a bigger one, or a bigger to a smaller one, or somebody tries to use say a kind of a remote working guidelines they see from say a Silicon Valley company, and they try it out in an Indian company. So what has been your experience till now trying to apply these kind of processes when people are in a distributed workforce? These kind of processes when people are in a distributed,
Uh, Experience I work with companies distributed globally. Um, I've had to work with resource. We also work with things. So actually, what work in in the Silicon Valley may not really work in Indian context. When when we some also that have propagated from validated times go in on the in letting candidates and get it adaptable before just directly diving it from a turn approach. It needs to be where you gain from people. For example,
I think
when
the
we work
audio is
in a
lagging a bit, so maybe
audio,
we can go off the video and maybe make some more bandwidth for audio, I guess, because the stream is lagging a bit. It seems like I think Nikhil is having a bit of network troubles, so we just holding on, waiting for him to rejoin.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. You're audible now.
Hey,
Yeah, I think we can
do you
turn
mind?
off the video maybe because like that would save a bit of bandwidth for the audio if it's lagging a bit.
All right. Is this any better?
Yeah. The audio is much clearer now.
Okay, cool. Um, yeah, so I was mentioning about the experience of working with Indian teams versus working with a globally distributed team, and certainly what works for Silicon Valley may not directly work in India. When we say that a particular methodology that was proven to be successful in the Valley, and when we bring it here and we say that let's just start implementing it over here, there's definitely some bit of onboarding that needs to happen. Even before onboarding, there's some level of assessment that needs to happen where that particular method works here or not. For example, the inside sales culture in the US is very different from how it is in India. Sales in India is more about feet on street and street smartness, which is not the case in the
Right,
US. There's a lot of selling that happens via inside sales. So we need to really understand the value that we are delivering to the end users, to the customers, and make our choices accordingly.
okay. That makes perfect
That makes
sense.
perfect sense.
So
So,
what I want to follow on that about is what do you have to say about discipline and accountability, especially in the context of trying to run a remote team in as easy way as possible, following the lean principles. So how do you work on these things?
Sure. So when we say discipline, it's quite funny because discipline is interpreted in very different contexts and very differently. For example, in some cases, discipline is interpreted by obedience and following instructions, whereas in some other cases, it is also interpreted as maintaining an order of things. So right now, the way things have been moving with the lockdowns and people working remotely, there's some bit of chaos that I have seen with some teams where the senior leadership have been extremely insecure, or they have their own apprehensions about whether people would follow a particular schedule, or whether we'll hit our deadlines or not. And for that we need some level of discipline and an orderly behavior. So when in a remote setup, it needs to be relooked and reimagined in a different manner, where we say that let's just focus on what we are here for, and what's the sort of value that we are trying to deliver. And as long as that is being delivered, let's not fuss about how many hours we are putting in, or what's our schedule like. As long as we are committed to the deliverable, that should be okay. So in that sense, it just sets a tone for everyone in the organization that my work matters more than my schedule, and that just sets a level of comfort with the workforce. And in my experience, I have seen developers and even non-developers deliver more efficiently when you give them that sense of motivation through a level of autonomy, show them how they can get better even when they're not in office, and giving them a sense of purpose, which is delivering value to the end user. So when we talk about discipline and maintaining an order of things when things are out of order, uh, we can we can definitely have these aspects laid out in front of the workforce, where we just motivate them with a level of autonomy, uh, and see how it goes.
Okay, that's a very interesting answer, and makes a lot of sense as well. Especially, I think I like the first point that you mentioned, that when just people are just adopting to working remotely, and you should not be, focused on discipline in a school teacher kind of a way, but empower people to produce their best work. I would like to delve into more tech oriented parts of this process, like how do you manage a tech team and so on. But just one question still for a more general case, like how do you manage a team for a in general way. What kind of reporting structures have you seen work out well, and what doesn't work out well? What sizes of teams do you usually would be suggesting for this kind of a setup?
Okay. The most efficient reporting structure that has worked out for me is where the number of reportees for anybody in the organization is not more than four, which means you interact on a daily basis only with your reporting manager and your reportees, which is not more than five people. In that scenario, it helps people to block time for meetings, and block time for their executional tasks, as well as block some time for their creative tasks. There's some because when you have a clear reporting structure like that, and a sort of a minimalistic reporting structure, it helps people to focus on their domestic chores. It helps to focus on mental health. A lot of people are experiencing irregular sleep patterns since everybody went remote. So some
Yep.
people, like
Yep.
I like to take a nap in the afternoon. And if I have many people reporting into me and pinging me every day, then my personal deliverable, my own deliverable goes for a toss, and then it's a panic situation. So the sort of reporting structure that has worked for me is a minimalistic one where there is a hierarchy, there's a clear delegation of tasks, but it's not like 10 people reporting into one person and that one person thinning out over consecutive Zoom calls, or you know multiple chat messages yet to be responded, part of multiple WhatsApp groups. We have seen all of that, and it just contributes to more waste of time when we talk about productivity. That is something that has worked out.
Makes sense. Very good. I would like to walk into the next set of questions that I have, which are a little bit more focused on how the tech teams and how the tech side of things look like. And I like to draw on more of your experience as being a CTO at Jombe, where you have, of course, led a tech team. So. Both in terms of applying a lean philosophy to work in general, and also in terms of remote culture. I would like to focus on a couple of things which I want, like both like your views and maybe some of your experiences in like what has worked for you, what has not worked for you, and some of them of course might be subjective, right? So I've got 4 points. I've got culture, tooling, discipline, and processes. Okay, so I mean, let's just talk about culture. So, what do you make of like the culture? Like, how do you grow culture? What is your definition of culture? I think that also would be a good thing to answer. What is your definition of culture, and how do you improve that also when you're looking to add people to your team? How does the culture change? How does the culture grow? All of that in context of both as using lean philosophy and also when you're working remotely.
Okay. Yeah. So this is quite an interesting and a broad level topic that even applies to non-tech teams. It's more of an organizational topic. So what happens is when we talk about culture, we need to look at it from both sides. A culture that's favorable to the business and a culture that's unfavorable to the business. We need to stay away from what's unfavorable, and for doing that, we need to understand what is the purpose of this organization that we're working with, and in that organizational structure, what is my own purpose when I work with that organization. So these things need to be laid out clearly, and they need to be talked about in a more transparent manner. Where this sort of transparency does not exist at the moment, it, it, it would be a case where people will not be habituated to an honest and a transparent dialogue. And there, some level of training needs to happen before these concepts are introduced. So, without getting too much deep into the textbook definitions of lean principles, I'll just list out what are the major characteristics which go by the textbook definitions. So so the first and foremost is you define what is value. So across the teams, across every effort that happens, sales, marketing, finance, design, product, engineering. Within engineering, there will be a DevOps team, there will be a front-end engineering team, there will be a testing team. So a value proposition needs to be defined at every level, and it needs to be percolated from the founders to the senior leadership to the team leadership and to the team members. So to put things in perspective, I might want to quote an example from my own experience with working with Jombe and a few more organizations. So so the single most important issue that we sort of discovered while interacting with multiple companies who were customers of Jombe's products for behavioral assessments and finding a cultural fit was that the CEO's vision is never transferred to the team members, uh, the smallest denominator. So we see that the CEOs would talk about the company's vision, but the junior developers will not be able to identify with it, and that disconnect needs to be bridged, which is where everyone starts defining what it means to be valuable, and it can be different and subjective for everybody, but as long as everybody has mentioned it or put it out transparently, that's when everyone else knows what that other person is there in the organization for. Now, this is a this is the first exercise that needs to be done. After this, when we talk about encouraging a favorable culture, we need to start mapping something called value stream. Where is it that we can get value out of this process? And when we say when we say that we need to map these resources, they may not be available in house. So in our case, we were a small startup, and we did not even have much experience when we started. The average age was 24. So in that sense, we started going out. We started participating in tech conferences, and we started making friends, and we started inviting people over for coffee or meeting them over coffee, and just asking them that, hey, you know what, I'm finding a problem here, and I'm stuck here. Can we sit for a 2 hour hackathon or a small hack session? So that was something where we started mapping our value stream. Where is it that we can bring in value, more value to the team? Once we've identified it, what is important is to ensure flow and identify what would be the hurdles that would stop that flow. For example, if a cultural misfit is sort of impacting our productivity, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be called out. And similarly, if there are any infrastructural hurdles that we are facing, like a poor internet connection, startups have these challenges where The infrastructure is not up to the mark and people are not able to deliver sometimes. So in that sense, we need to identify those and we need to ensure a smooth flow, which is a huge part of setting the right culture where the things that stop us from being productive need to be the removing those things out of the flow is a priority. It needs to be a priority. Following which, the next thing that is there in the lean philosophy is to develop a culture where you work on things that the customer needs, and whatever else that is there, you put it on a lower priority, and you establish a sort of a pull from the customers. So it's not like I've built a cool product and now I'm going to go out and sell it. It's more to do with, hey, this is the need of the market, and that's what I have got out from my discussions, from my pre-sales conversations, and that's what I'm going to build. So
Right.
by that, we don't end up with having an inventory of products or services or tools that we have built over time, but there's nobody to buy it. Uh, so in that sense, everybody is aligned with that purpose, and everybody sees their work being put into action and being valued by somebody.
Right. I
What
want to
I
interject a bit here. I mean,
interject a bit here. I mean,
how do you
how do
do this? Like, any learnings on being able to successfully, I think, transfer this vision to the, the foot soldiers, the junior developers? Because in my experience, my own growing my own team has also been like, sometimes like you are looking at like as the founder or the CTO, you're looking at the needs of the user, the the financial situation of the company as well. So you have a much broader picture in mind, and you know that what needs to be done and what does not need to be done in your mind is something. And then a developer is just thinking that this is a cool thing to build and I really want to build it, or somebody just wants to focus a lot of time on I don't know, like automating a bunch of things while it just do it manually and just move to the next thing which needs to be built. So this, I think, happens a lot of times. And what is the best way to transfer this vision to those people, making them empathize with the needs of the business? And sometimes they will have to sacrifice something which would be like the most interesting, curious thing that they want to do next as an engineer, but they have to sacrifice that and take up the needs of the business also. So any learnings on how being able to do this successfully?
Okay, yeah, that's a very common scenario that I think all of us have come across, and just to get the point through to junior developers, to tell them that, hey, I know that this is cool, but it is not the need of the market right now, and we may not be able to do this. So the things that have worked for that I've seen working, and we did a lot of this in Jombe, was we constantly shared the business numbers and the vision of the company, and how sales is progressing, how marketing is progressing, and what's the need of the market. We kept talking about it frequently with everyone in the team. So anytime I got a chance to hang out with my junior developer over a cup of coffee, I would keep talking about what my CEO is doing or what my sales head is working on, and what sort of conversations people are having, and where the market is going. So what I've seen is wherever these conversations do not happen frequently, and it's always about talking about the deliverable and asking for the deadlines, this point is missed, and there's a level of disconnect that happens. So, from a cultural standpoint, what we introduced was, and this came from the founders. I found it pretty interesting. Was at around 5 o'clock every day in the evening, people would step out for a sutta break or a chai break. Now,
Okay.
okay. Now the founders noticed that this is a time when people don't want to work. Those 15 or 20 minutes of sutta or chai breaks are the one is the time when people don't want to work and they can indulge in banter that is non-deliverable talk. So the company started hosting snacks in office and chai in office at 5 o'clock, so that everyone is there. You facilitate your snacks and tea and coffee beverages, and anybody who wants to go out for sutta can step out for 5-10 minutes and come back. But that was sort of a networking time, a cross-functional networking time that was blocked officially, where nobody worked, and we would play Damsharaj, we would play Antakshari, we would play Pictionary, and in between
Nice,
those
nice, nice.
activities, we would discuss these business goals and how things are happening, and you would see the CEO taking to junior developers and talking to them. You would see a CTO talking to a salesperson and understanding what the current business requirement is and where is it that we can add more firepower. So that used to happen on a daily basis, and it still happens in Jockey. So that is something which really helped, and everybody in the team, did not lose out on what's happening out there. So anytime I had to work with a junior developer and tell them that, hey, this is something that's really cool. I really find it very cool as an engineer. But do you remember the salesperson talking about this one more thing that was on a higher priority, and we really need to get it out in the market so that we can get the next customer. The guy used to get it, and it was more to do with a cross-functional talk that would happen between teams. So yeah, that is something that really worked out pretty well. Having an official time blocked for cross-functional communication and across the team, regardless of the seniority level or regardless of the function. So yeah,
So what
that's
about
something.
remote? Like when you're doing it, working remotely, then it's not possible to block some time out for Chai Sutta for the entire company. I think now that a lot of people are working remotely, that could also be a challenge. I mean, my experience has been at least like people in leadership should like, especially if teams are not, if the team is either big or like everybody in the team does not converse with each other on a regular basis or something, then I believe like the senior leadership, if they can send out regularly emails to like broad-based emails which reach almost everybody in the company, and they talk about what's happening and what is their vision, and like candid emails. I think those really I have loved. Like when I have worked in a team where I was not the leadership, I have loved receiving emails like that, which keeps me abreast of what the organization is doing. I try to implement those myself as well. But yeah, I mean, that's my experience. What about you, and how do you think you can improve this, especially if people are working remotely then?
Oh, absolutely. So I was chatting with my former colleague who's at Jombe, who's leading the capability building vertical over there, and I was asking him how has the lockdown worked out for everyone in the company. And he says the thing that people miss the most is the snack time, uh, because that's when the banter would happen every day. So the thing that kept me going when I went remote was that I used to miss that time when I started working remotely while being with Jumbe. And what really worked out was a weekly catch up with cross functional leadership. Because I was in the CTO position, we would get into a meeting. We had blocked Mondays for that meeting, and in my case, I used to travel. I used to fly to Pune every Monday, and we used to meet. This can happen over chats and video calls also, but those meetings used to be a couple of hours meeting. We had about 10 core team members, and everybody would present something on the lines of a 3P framework: progress, plans, and problems. In that sense, what would happen is every team member would prepare just one slide each. I mean, three slides. One for what sort of progress did we make in the last 1 week, what were the problems that we encountered. This would be the second slide, and the third slide would be what are the plans for the team for this coming week. And there would be not more than 3 points in each slide, so everyone would get about 15 minutes to talk, and we would have that session, that meeting where all the team members would be onboarded with what the other teams are doing and what problems they are facing, and how can we solve it together in a cohesive manner. So that just kept the bonding between the core team intact, and a similar methodology was followed by each of the core team members with their respective teams. and even that would happen on Mondays. So the only time when we would engage in meetings would be on Mondays. So initially it would be the core team discussion, and for the later half of the day it would be a team level discussion. Like I would do it with engineering, my product manager would do it with the product team, design would do it with design, and so on. Sales would do it with sales. So in that sense, whatever we have learned about the other teams would be transferred transparently to our respective teams, and that way it really helped us even when I was remote. And that is something which again is more of a structural organizational structural feature, that you take this habit inside the organizational structure and you say that, hey, we dedicate our Mondays for this. So all our sales people who were out there on the field selling our products would be asked to be in office on Mondays, and they would not sell on Mondays. So this is more of a structural change that really helped us, and it ensured whether people are in office or not in office, we would still be updated with what's happening and what's the vision and in what direction the organization is moving, so that even my team members would be equally motivated to deliver.
Nice. That makes sense, and all of those things coming together can help improve the culture. Another thing I want to touch upon again, is about tooling. So this is like, I think, a multi-pronged question, I think. So of course, one thing is, what kind of tools do you prefer for, say, tracking tasks, communication, and for especially in tech teams, for developers to discuss, share docs, track issues. So what kind of tools? That's one thing. Another thing is when to use a very specific tool. When can you just simply fall back to tracking things over an email thread itself? So when do you take calls like that? And how much focus should be on tooling? I have heard from some people that having the right tools is important. Without the right tools you can't succeed. Some people say that doing a bike shedding over what tools to use can waste your time. So there are both sides to the coin. What's your experience on the subject of tooling?
So there's no silver bullet to this. Different things work differently for different people, and I would not say that there's a right or wrong answer to this. What works more is what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. In our case, I would say that I swear by Google spreadsheets. They are the simplest. They have the lowest entry barrier. They work beautifully when you are communicating in a cross-functional environment. And to, I mean, to give you an example, when we started tracking bugs, we started with Bugzilla. We moved on to GitHub issues. We moved on to GitHub and Bitbucket issue tracking, and we came back to Google Spreadsheets because at that time we were completely focused on acceptance tests with BDD testing, and our product team was quite capable of writing scenarios with Cucumber, which we would take and we would translate that into a Selenium acceptance test. So what happened was we never had a testing team until we went into a growth stage. So in that sense, my product people were never on GitHub. They were never on Bitbucket, and even Bugzilla was sort of an overhead for them. But they really understood spreadsheets, and even we understood spreadsheets. So just writing a bug and changing its status from a green background or from a red background to a green background would be sufficient for us for reporting, and it really scaled across functions. Even sales understood it. We did these bug mash sessions, okay, pretty often in the company. During every major release, even the sales representative would sit and test our product for acceptance, because they were the ones who were facing our customers, and they would sell it out, and they would say that, hey, you know what, if it doesn't work, it just puts a dent on my credibility out there, so let me just sit and test it out for you. So we all would sit for one day and we test it out and we do it. So in that sense, when people did not have GitHub accounts, Google Spreadsheets really work for us for even issue tracking. Having said that, when we talk about using specific tools for specific purposes, we had a level of autonomy where every team was independent to choose their own tools for internal purposes, like. Like we used our CI and CD systems based on the comfort and based on the sort of talent that we had and the sort of expertise we had. In the same way, our marketing team was also autonomous in the way that they would use. They started with Mail Merge, then they moved on to SendGrid and Mailchimp and other things for sending out newsletters, and they got used to it. It was more of an organic growth for everybody. It was more of an evolutionary process rather than one person coming in and saying that, hey, you know what, let's just use this tool and everybody needs to get trained on it and now let's just start using it. So it was more of a democratic process where we used to constantly discuss what works for us, what doesn't work for us. Is this something that aligns with our deliverable, and is this something that can add value to what we are delivering? So tooling, to tool or to not tool, is a very subjective question. What works for you on email may not work for some other team over email. So it's a very subjective call, and it also depends when you're talking from a CXO perspective or from a senior management perspective. It also depends on your hiring goals. So if you're not going to hire people who understand a particular tool, it's better to not go into a wishful thinking and say that, yeah, I'll introduce this tool right now, I'll get new people on board and I'll train them. That's wishful thinking, in my opinion. So in that case, it makes a lot of sense to just open that topic to people in the team and understand what's comfortable, what's not comfortable, and then go about bringing in value from your own experience, because maybe I have used more tools in my life than my teammates, so I can bring in that value in a very non-judgmental and an empathetic manner. So that is something that I think brings in a lot of value into even building a team culture. How do you perceive tools? How do you perceive the use of tools? Maybe we might end up abusing a tool for something that it is not meant for. So these things need to be constantly discussed. So what I'm getting at is regular communication and effective communication is key to maintaining an efficient remote culture. It cannot be just one call a day, or uh, just one performance appraisal that happens in 1 year. It needs to be a constant process.
Perfect, perfect. That makes a lot of sense, and I like that answer about Google spreadsheets. And it has been my experience personally at my own company managing that as well. Using tools with lower entry barriers, not focusing on what all features it has, but how many people can easily get started with using it, is of course a better way to look at it. And really appreciate that answer. And of course, what tool is appropriate would of course has to be a subjective call for most of the situations, but that's a really good set of points that you have. Now I want to delve a little more into very core technical processes, but also looking at this from a leadership standpoint. So how do you drive processes like two things especially? One is code review, okay, and the code review can first of all be challenging being remote in the first place, if people are not accustomed to doing it. I mean, I have started off my life as a developer working on a lot of open source projects where uh, I was just sitting at home working on a project with somebody from Europe, somebody from USA, and so on. And it was very remote in nature. But a lot of times, like I recently have spent a stint at Zomato, and there a lot of the review process happens with people sitting together. Unfortunately, I think now that people would be working remotely, they might be facing some problems around that as well. So about that's one thing about code review process. And another thing is like how do you work with, say when you're building a new feature that you have to do, and there might be a product owner who would come up with a vision of that feature that needs to be built. Then the design team has to collaborate on it, the developer has to build it, and then of course inside the development team also, how do you want to implement it? There's going to be architectural discussions. The calls need to be taken on what architecture it should follow, what is the best way of doing it. There might be 2 3 different opinions around it. Both these things involve people talking to each other, and I think resolving conflicts as well, because there might be difference in opinion. And I want you to answer this question in a very Indian context. Our audience would also be pretty majorly Indian in nature, and the challenges in an Indian context would be different from, I think, say how these things happen in a Silicon Valley company. So yeah, I mean, how both these things work. Discussing how to build new things, discussing code reviews. What has been your experience on this, and any suggestions that you have for other people?
Okay, so you mentioned about code review and how does it happen in a remote environment, and the second one was about decision making and conflict resolution in topics where you need opinions from multiple people and multiple stakeholders. So and then you spoke about the challenges that we face in an Indian context. So what I'll do is I'll go with the by answering the last one first. The single major challenge that I see in an Indian context is is the ability or the inability to communicate or articulate effectively. That is one thing that I have seen absent, or it's there. Like people just like a lot of people are they find it very difficult to communicate effectively when the person is not present in front of them. Non-verbal communication or body language plays a very crucial role in the Indian workforce. And when it comes to text-based communication, or when it comes to an asynchronous communication, where two people are not required to be present at the same time, at the same place, at the same time, uh, uh, things really go for a toss, and it becomes very inefficient when people are not able to communicate or articulate their thoughts in an efficient manner. So that is a major challenge that I have seen in an Indian context. When we see that and compare it with truly distributed global teams, the ones that have been able to succeed in maintaining that culture are the ones who have been able to communicate effectively. So the role of communication plays a very important role. I mean, communication plays a very important role in maintaining a remote culture. And by that, I don't simply mean writing effective emails. It also means understanding the precedence or the order of channels, the communication channels that we use. If it can go on email, it doesn't have to go on chat. If it can go on chat, it doesn't need a call. If it can go on a call, then it does not need a face-to-face conversation or a video chat. So these things need to be, people need to be trained on these aspects, which I find are missing in the Indian context. And there's not much focus given by organizations in training people into understanding these things, and there's limited focus on the soft skills or the softer aspects of these nitty gritties of communication. So you'll often find people, senior architects or senior developers, receiving a lot of things from their reportees when they're working remote, and all they need is a call, and the senior leadership gets thinned out just answering those calls, and it gets frustrating at the end of the day. So that is one thing which is lacking here, and we really need to work hard into training our people for articulating their thoughts in an efficient manner. The second question that you had was how do we uh, sort of work around and manage scenarios where multiple opinions and stakeholders are required. So again, if I were to choose, I would really work on maintaining an asynchronous culture so that we don't have this expectation of having people available at that particular time to sort of resolve uh, a problem at hand. For example, if there's an architectural decision that needs to go, with appropriate planning and a transparently communicated again communication. So a transparently communicated roadmap, you can always plan it beforehand, and you can start warming people up into that discussion way before. Like when you are in an office setup, you can always call people for a 10 minutes meeting and just tell them about that problem at the spur of the moment and have it resolved face to face. We don't When we don't have that luxury, it makes sense to be a little more organized. Plan your deliverable accordingly, identify roadblocks a little in advance, and then communicate it and start warming people up and telling them, communicating, talking about it. That hey, you know what, we are going to run into this issue next week. Can we all just put some bandwidth from our time into thinking about it and evaluating options and what sort of tech stack can solve this problem, or what sort of tool can solve this problem, and then let's sync upon it on a Friday or towards the end of this week so that we have some direction next week. So there's a more of an it's more of an organized and a collective effort from everybody rather than one person just calling everybody for a meeting and running it on their own. So and the other part that you mentioned was whenever a cross-functional resolution is required on design, let's say feedback is required on design. So in that case, I find some tools really useful and worth mentioning. One of the tools that really did it very well for us was InVision, where you can actually have mockups put up on InVision, and you can have the calls to action, and you can design a UX, and you can hand it over to your reviewers, and then there can be a level of commenting that can follow, where people give feedback without being there in office or without being available at the same time. And I think there are more tools available right now that do it, and uh, and these can certainly be explored deeper. Um, so these tools need to be leveraged when there's a cross-functional discussion that needs to happen. Talking about Google Docs, I really love those. So the single important feature that really worked for us in feedback and communication when it's a cross-functional debate that is happening was the suggestions mode on a Google Word doc, where you can actually add suggestions and the owner of the document can accept or reject your suggestions based on the discussion that happens in the comment section. So you can actually have a review process baked in your organization using a very rudimentary or not a very fancy tool like a Word document, and you can still have an effective review policy. And there's a lot of feedback that keeps flowing in every direction. It's not a unidirectional communication, and then it becomes a more effective solution at the end of it. So those are a few things that I found worth mentioning during this conversation. And coming to code reviews, uh, a challenge that I have seen often is the power tussle that happens between senior developers and junior developers, or uh, uh, an authoritative talk that happens in office, which gets translated in passive aggressive code commits. So this is something which I have personally seen firsthand, where you have a discussion with a developer and tell them that this is not an appropriate approach and it needs to be done in a different way, and they don't agree, and they just go out and write a passive aggressive commit message just to vent it out. So when code reviews happen remotely, this can get amplified. and misunderstandings can lead to a greater damage where people want to quit their jobs ultimately, because people don't quit their jobs, they quit their managers. And to tackle this problem, what I think needs to happen is fostering a meritocratic culture where if somebody wants to point out a solution, they also need to come with the merits of using that solution. It cannot be something that, hey, you know what, I find it useful, I have enough experience on it, and that's why I want to use it. It
Makes
cannot be
sense.
that. Makes sense. So a meritocratic culture would foster that environment where things are chosen on merit and not based on your experience or your personal uh, biases. It's more to do with how much merit does the solution carry, and that needs to be communicated in your code review comments. It just cannot be bluntly said that I want this in a particular way and that's why it needs to change. It cannot be that. There needs to be enough information and enough context that needs to be given. Maybe a Stack Overflow question that answers that query, maybe a Quora debate or a Reddit debate or a Hacker News conversation that you want to sort of give in there in your code review comments. Maybe a GitHub issue that has been discussed at length. It can be anything that can help the developer understand where you're coming from and why this needs to happen. And then this culture gets translated and transferred to your junior developers. And I personally have seen the effects of it when my junior developers started answering questions on Stack Overflow. They started building a reputation, and then they started coming back and countering my arguments with a meritocratic attitude, and not judging us, not judging each other on our seniority or on the sort of position that we carry in the organization. So that is something which really helps. And again, even there, effective communication plays a very important role. It needs to be a non-judgmental communication. It cannot be a judgmental attitude from either sides.
Okay, that's a good set of answers around that, and really important to keep the tonality, the violence, and the conflicts in the communications down, especially because when you're working, I think remotely, that is your only mode of communication, and like, okay, somebody has written a passive aggressive comment on GitHub, but you can go and talk to them face to face and resolve it. So it's not like that when you're working remotely. Then your lines of communication are limited, and we should not pollute them. So I really love that point. I really agree with that. So I'd like to move on to another thing, which is about documentation and how do you approach that, what all things we can do. But there are um, so there are a couple of actually follow-up questions actually that we have gotten. So Zainab has a very interesting question, that what do you mean by effective communication? Like if you could just explain that in a more nuanced way, like when you say communication and effective communication. You did tell a little bit about it's not just writing good mails, but what is, like, if you have to give, say, you have these tweets, people share 5 bullet points for better communication. So if I have to just say something like that in a very short brief way, any tips for effective communication, especially from like both, like people who are going to be communicating with their peers, people who would be communicating to their managers, people who would be communicating to their reportees. So all three things. Any tips for effective communication?
Okay, so I'll answer this in the Indian context, where communication can really go haywire and can be misunderstood. People can be misunderstood, and I'd like to start this discussion on this particular topic from a scenario where communication plays an important role, and that those scenarios are the ones where you need to make a hard decision, or you need to give some sort of a feedback to somebody, and there's always this apprehension of the other person feeling offended and becoming aggressive, or becoming too submissive, or losing faith in you or in the organization or in themselves. To understand that aspect of effective communication, one tool that has helped me grow in my ways of communicating. And I can tell you that I was pretty bad at communicating when I was a first time manager. And even we see this around when people tell you that, hey, you know what, if everybody thinks good about you, you're probably not being a good manager. Somebody needs to hate you. You need to be very assertive about what you want. So I find it a little uh, biased, and it has not worked for me personally. People really, I mean, it just backfired when that happened. When I made myself a little hateful for people. So what has worked is something called nonviolent communication, which is a I mean, it's a systematic process, but to put it in a nutshell, it's more to do with empathizing with self and then empathizing with others, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, and then going out and talking about it. It's more to do with a thoughtful way of articulating things and focusing on how you feel about it, how you sense these things, and being vulnerable to your teammates, showing them your human aspects instead of showing yourself as a superhero in the organization. So if I were to give an example, it could be something like, let's say we are into a sprint, and you see that you are going to miss that deadline. How do you sort of get your team up to speed, and without going in a direction where people are offended, or they start taking this in a negative manner, and start it goes in a toxic status. So in that sense, in this situation, the way to go about it, what I think could be effective would be to sort of lay out your insecurities in front of your team, honestly and transparently, being intellectually honest to yourself and your team, and tell them that, hey, you know what, if we miss this deadline, I fear that we'll lose a customer, and it will impact my credibility in front of my teammates, my peer group, and it will impact our collective credibility as a team in front of the company. And I really want to make this happen, and I really want to know if you all would be willing to support me in this. So this is more compassionate. It's non-authoritative, and at the end of the conversation, you leave your team with a question where you ask them whether they are willing to do it or not, so that you leave some room for people to come and dissent and tell you that, hey, you know what, I'm busy over the weekend. There's something important that I want to take up, and I don't think I'll be able to support you in this. And you should be okay with it. And you need to find contingency with your peer group. So in the same way, when you go up to your peer group, let's say I'm a CTO, and I need to go up to my CEO and CMO and CPO and tell them that we are not going to be able to hit this deadline. Even there, it needs to be intellectually honest and as transparent as it can be, and tell them that, hey, you know what, I'm really scared that we are not going to be able to hit this deliverable, and it's just making me anxious about things, and I really wanted to raise this to the team, and what can we do about it? Is there something that you can help me with? So this is about being, sort of peeling off those layers of being invincible and invulnerable and being in a senior position, so that you cannot be, you are more capable than everybody else. So there's a lot of pressure on you. So it doesn't have to be that. The moment you start removing those layers and lay yourself bare in front of your organization and your peer group and your team members, everybody starts connecting with you as fellow humans, and that's when a compassionate and a non-judgmental culture steps in, and it becomes a more inclusive setup, where everybody is also motivated to work together because everybody feels included, and not just on paper, or it's just not just uh, you know uh, a pep talk that's happening, but it's actually an honest conversation that's happening. This is what I meant by effective communication, and it can happen verbally or non-verbally, in text, on email, or even on your code review comments.
Right. So I think that's a good this thing breakdown on what ways to make communication effective, and uh, I think people would have gotten a lot of specific tips to glean out of that. I think a few things that I learned also really helpful. Would like to implement these in practice going ahead myself as well. So as I was saying, another uh, topic that I want to delve into. It's a broad topic, so we will take it step by step. It's about documentation, and specifically about documentation. Like I think I've seen, for example, in an organization that I have worked, somebody who knows how to deploy the one of the services, and every time a new person in the team joins, and he used to code pair with that person or just answer things on chat, do this step, then do that step, and like every time a new developer joins, and he's just doing that step over and over again, and I just once I just went up to him and I was like, why don't you just put that up in a document and just share it with somebody? And I think if he said something on the line, so nobody reads the documents. Even if I share, they will still ask me, so what's the point? Why do I spend time on the documentation? And I think there are many different problems around documentation, like whether people are not writing it, whether people are not reading it, whether people do not know where to find a document from, and if is the document written from the perspective of the person who has written the document, or is it written from the perspective of the person who will be reading it? That's also very important when you're writing documentation. So I'd like to go through a few specific points. I think the first thing I want to talk about is in your experience, where do teams get stuck when they're starting out on documentation? I think if it's a small team and you're just building out products, the first few months you'll be just shipping things and not really be documenting. There's a point that comes when you actually start documenting things, which is really what happens. I mean, documenting from day one is the best practice, everybody knows that, but then there's a point when you really start focusing on documentation. When you really do that, like what are the problems that people face? Is there, like, in your experience, is there any tools that can help with that, any particular process that can help with that, anything that the leadership can do to improve this, like when you're getting started, what stops you, and how can you prevent those things, get over those hurdles?
So, so one important aspect that I personally felt would really help would be to encourage a culture where everybody is expected to take notes uh, during each conversation. It's not about sending out MOMs, but making personal notes on whatever is happening around you. So, for example, like you mentioned, the scenario where you really want to go out and market and ship fast. You have this deliverable that needs to be hit by the end of this month, and you cannot invest time in documentation, or you cannot justify spending time on documenting right now. Anyway, you are the only person working on it, and you don't see anybody else working on it for the next couple of months. So, let's say after 2 months, you end up hiring two junior developers, and now you want to hand it over to them. You start documenting it for them, but 2 months down, it happens, and we've got a lot of memes around this also, that the code that I wrote 2 months ago, even when I go back and look at it, I cannot put a lot of context around it, and I cannot understand why I did it. I know what it does, I know where it fits in architecture, but I've lost context, or I've lost some part of that context, because in 2 months, as an early stage company, or a startup, you have sort of moved so far away from where you were 2 months ago, that you don't have visibility on what was the state of mind that you were in when you were writing that piece of code. So you end up missing out on some nuances, and some situations and some scenarios which could be useful for these junior developers, and make sure that they don't repeat your mistakes when they start off. So it really helps. A simple habit that really helps in countering this is to keep taking personal notes in your notebook or Evernote or wherever you want it, um, so that you can go back and refer to it. So you can put it in your commit history. You can put it wherever you would like, and whenever you start off with documentation, you can go and read that context. You can just it's like micro journaling that you start doing. You get into a habit of it, and the senior leadership can play a very important role in encouraging that habit by starting with themselves. And during each meeting, you can start encouraging people to sort of start taking notes in their own context, in their own personal space, however they want to do it. They can do it at the end of the day. They can do it whenever. They don't even need to share it with you, but you just keep talking about it. You just keep talking about the importance of it, so that when you actually sit and start documenting, you can start with referring those journals. Uh, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it definitely does make sense. I think I faced that myself. I have, of course, been a junior developer at some point of time and have inherited somebody else's code. I have been a senior developer and been in those shoes where I have handing over a project to somebody and they're asking, "Why did you do it this way? Why did you not do it that way?" And then I'm starting to think myself, "Yeah, why did I not do that way myself?" And then after spending wasting another couple of hours, I realize, oh, that's because that thing does not work for this particular scenario. And then I realized that damn, I should have written at least a comment, why did I do it this way. That happens. And really good point, really good point. In fact, I will give a very specific example also. I think we run online courses at coding blocks, and when you try to buy a course, you don't buy a course, you basically buy a batch of the course. And if somebody looks at our code right now today when we're doing online courses, they might feel like, why do you have a concept of batch? Because online classes don't have batches. You just buy a course and you see the videos. But originally our online product was made to support our offline courses, and our offline courses run in batches. They run in every 3 month batches, so that's why they have batches. But today, if you have to explain why batches exist inside the product architecture, it's difficult unless it's documented why we took such a step. So yeah, it's really helpful in those cases where you yourself lose context, and having documentation can help around that. So now that we have talked about how to get started, when to get started, and you should get started as early as possible. uh, that said, is like the decision of documenting something and how much to document, when to document, are these team decisions, are these functional decisions, do they happen, should they happen, uh, from the developer level? Should you try to ingrain a culture where the developers document automatically? Should you force documentation on them? Like, how do you where does the decision of documenting happen? And who sets the roadmap for documentation, which is more important, I think. Like, when documentation is happening, do you set aside time for that, or is it assumed that deadlines you're setting include the time set up for documentation? How do you set up a roadmap for that, that we need to get this thing documented by XYZ time or something? Which things we need to document and keep in a wiki or something? Which things are okay to just be comment inside the code? Which things you should send an email to the entire team announcing that, okay, we have built this thing, here's a document for that? How do those decisions get taken, and how does this process get driven in your experience?
Okay. So some parameters that I usually like to consider, and when we talk about any sort of decision that needs to be made, in this case about how much to document, when to document, where to document, we need to put a lot of focus on the end users. What am I doing this for, and who am I doing this for? So let's say from a CTO standpoint, or from a senior management standpoint, if we look at these decisions, I would also like to account for my hiring roadmap. So if in the coming quarters, if I'm going to hire some junior developers, my documentation needs to be in a way that my junior developers can resonate with, or it needs to be it needs to fulfill the purpose that it is meant for. But if I'm not going to be hiring any junior developers and I'm going to be having the same workforce that I have right now, and I have established some level of comfort with my team right now, maybe that deeper level of documentation is not required at this point, and I can go about annotating specific things which probably I built independently without taking any help from my teammates. And now when I have to hand it over, I need to give enough context on why I did it and what purpose does it fulfill. So in that sense, it really helps in understanding what are we documenting for and who are we documenting for. So like you said, that when does an email go out for cross functional communication, that we have shipped this out and it is ready to be sold. So in that case, we need to understand the the habits and the comfort level of my other functions in the organization, and that's how I can take a decision. So it also can be a democratic process where you dedicate a few minutes during a quarter or during a sprint even to talk to your cross-functional team leaders and understand what is it that the teams would be able to gather, understand, and be comfortable with. Like in our case, it was email and Google spreadsheet. So whenever we had to document something or a feature documentation or a story that we had to write for the UX, we really found a combination of tools like InVision, spreadsheets, and email. Very simple tools, nothing fancy there. We have tried Pivotal, Asana, Trello, uh, and many other things that I cannot remember right now. But ultimately, we settled on these because there was a buy-in from everybody. So it really makes sense to put focus on your end users, on who is going to read that documentation and does it make sense to them when they read it. So another part of the process that I think is really helpful is to have a review process on documentation. So once you document it, it does not need to be forgotten, which happens mostly when you say that I'll document this class today and I'll keep developing, and you never come back to the documentation. You never that class has evolved, like you said that you got rid of batches, but it still exists in code. So you never documented it. So this needs to happen and baked into the organizational structure where you say that even documentation needs review and it needs a 360-degree review where your peer group also gives you feedback on your documentation, your juniors also give you feedback, and your seniors also take a look at it and give feedback to you. And it can be time consuming, which is why it makes sense to have an asynchronous culture where people don't need to be present in a meeting to debate on whether this documentation is effective or not. It can happen over a comment thread or a review thread, maybe a suggestions thread on a Word doc, or maybe on a GitHub wiki page where you review revisions and pull requests for your documentation. So the feedback mechanism has to be there. It cannot be a once and done thing when we talk about effective documentation. So these are two things that I think can really help in a remote setup when we don't have the luxury of having people come together for a meeting and discuss on a topic that seemingly does not add much value to your bottom line, to your business, but it goes a long way in making sure that your onboarding is smooth for anybody who is new to that code, or to any process.
Okay, I think those are very good, things to keep in mind. You know, these are all important questions. I think some of them are subjective, also has to be taken on a case-to-case basis on the thing that is getting documented and by the team. But these are, of course, very important. Uh, I want to draw on your experience. I think you have worked on a lot of projects, seen a lot of things getting documented, and I think sometimes you might have seen things go wrong as well. I just want to see if you can, rack up your brain and think of cases where documentation experiments have gone wrong. I think maybe keeping I'm just, for example, guessing maybe like somebody kept the documentation and the code separately. The code got updated, the documentation did not, or anything else like you can give some cautionary tales about documentation, what things people should not do, anything that you have seen go wrong.
So, in my experience, I the this one anecdote that I like to really quote about how not to document. And when we're talking about documenting, I'm coming from a context of an engineering documentation where you start documenting code by writing code comments, and you start giving out some context on what this variable does and why is it named in a particular way, or uh, which function mutates this object, or uh, where is this coming from. So so there's this one typical scenario which I have seen more than once, unfortunately, is naming a variable. Like it's a very well-known quote in the engineering circles that there's only two things that are very critical in engineering. One is naming variables, and the other is cache invalidation. So in that sense, what I saw was there was this particular variable. Its value was the number 7, and it was named SEVEN7. Going forward, a few releases, that value changed to 5, and the name did not change. So it was SEVEN7 equal to 5. In the absence of context, the developer, whoever did it only for maintaining code compliance, where we don't have magic numbers in code. We have a variable instead, and the developer just replaced the number with the spelling of that number. So that was one thing which I really found detrimental to the purpose of documenting, or the purpose of having not having magic numbers in code. So so the solution or the approach to resolve something like this is to again have the vision translated from the seniors to the person who's actually doing it, and tell them what are we doing this for, what purpose does this fulfill. If somebody else reads this code, is this going to make sense to them? So yeah, so that was one. The other one was about sort of overly documenting a piece of code. When you start writing an essay above a function, and in some cases it's useful, especially in open source projects when people out of your organization are also contributing to the code. Uh, but when you are doing it internally, you can even have some internal wiki links or some documentation links there. It doesn't need to be an essay. So that was one or two anti patterns that I saw in that use case.
Makes sense. I mean, the 7 example is, uh, I mean, it's ironic that it is funny, but everybody who has been in the industry for a few years would have had a similar experience somewhere or the other. I think I know, I don't know the names, but I have worked on code bases where there's a variable called zero, the value of which is not zero, and I totally get you. But yeah, about the writing an essay above the function is also something. Yeah, I mean, it's something I try to uh, communicate with my team also sometimes when I'm reviewing code. Is that if you don't need to probably describe how to use the function or what adverse effects can come out of using the function, if there are no such things required or no such things actually there, and the function itself is like just one line, and reading it is like the name of the argument, the name of the function, it is all really really obvious, like math dot square function, you know so something like that, you can just skip the part of documenting it, because sometimes I've seen is going ahead, people change how the function works and they forget changing the documentation, and then that can be detrimental. But then again, it's subjective, of course. Write documentation if somebody needs to know how that function is supposed to be used, or what is not supposed to be sent into that function. Those kind of things are to be there. So yeah, very good points around that. I would like to just go towards a very final segment that we have. So that's on project management, right? Given that if your team is working remotely and it's trying to work in a lean way, some challenges that arise in project management, and some opportunities also for project management, as in things that become easier or more efficient automatically because of working remotely, or by applying lean principles to work, you can very quickly capitalize on some gains on the positive side. And on the negative side, like working in this kind of a setup, what things can be challenging monsters to watch out for in terms of project management.
Okay. So the word that everybody dreads is deadlines, and we often, I mean, as leaders, or as a team leader, we often end up getting anxious and insecure about not being able to hit the deadline, because the project is not running on track as per the roadmap. Um one thing that I see happen more frequently in an Indian scenario is the lack of expectation management. Um Here, a lot of people are not able to say no to something that they cannot deliver, and by that I mean, if let's say if you're having a conversation with your product lead, and there's a requirement that has come out from sales, but you cannot deliver it by weekend. Um, Team leads are, uh, it happens more out of an insecurity, but and even our conditioning, the way things roll even in our personal lives. uh, uh, the team lead ends up saying a yes even when they know that the team cannot deliver, and then the team lead goes back and starts pressing the developers on delivering it, and getting them to work on over the weekends, or pressing people into doing things, and then eventually uh, you miss that deadline, and then that habit is inculcated. I have lived this journey where the team sort of started taking it for granted that whatever is committed is never delivered, and the teams themselves started blocking buffer time against a deliverable, and they would communicate an earlier deadline to me so that I can deliver at the actual time when it needs to go out. So this is something which is detrimental to the culture, and even uh, to the sort of ethos that people carry in an organization. And the art of saying no in a non-judgmental manner, in a way that you are assertive while saying no, is pretty important, and this becomes even more important when you are working remotely, when you're working from not working from an office space where you can't see each other. So in that case, it becomes very important, and there, I think what really works out is, if you have access, and if you have a team that is comfortable with using a project management tool that can rate tasks, or that can add review points or some sort of a rating to a task. Like initial during initial days, we tracked our team velocity on Pivotal. That seemed to work for us for some time, and there the entire team was sort of you know on board with the fact about how much can we deliver, and there the role of estimation plays a very important role. How well do you know your team, and how well can you plan things in advance, and have your estimations closer to the real delivery date. So even there, knowing your team plays a very important role. And when we say that we want our team to grow, we want our junior developers to start performing and delivering better things and in a more efficient manner. It cannot be an unrealistic target that can be set for junior developers. It needs to be realistic, and even a contingency needs to be planned that if the developer is not going to deliver, then there needs to be a backup plan of a senior developer stepping in and doing it for the on behalf of this person who found it difficult to deliver on time. So all that happens when it happens remotely. Again, I'll vouch for Google Spreadsheets. I cannot have more on how well it has contributed to our culture to just have a simple tool with low entry barrier where everybody can see what the team is doing. But again, it's a very subjective choice of what to use and when to use it. Uh, at a fundamental level, it boils down to a transparent communication and expectation management where people get into a habit of understanding that if I say no, it does not mean that I'm incapable. It only means that I will fail if this task comes to me. So maybe I can deliver it next week, but I cannot deliver it right now, and it's okay to say no. So that is something which is very crucial for an effective project management and working with cross-functional uh, teams uh, when it comes to working remotely. It can really backfire if this is not in place.
Makes sense. Really, making the people in your team comfortable is really of utmost importance. I can vouch for that. Have experienced this from both sides of the table, and really interesting answer. Again, this is also something I would pick up a few tips for myself as well from here. And so. I think there aren't any other questions from my side, and on and all, I think this was a really, really great set of things we were able to discuss here. Loved all of your takes on these things, and I hope that people who are especially like smaller startups who might not have had all the tools and the processes in place to work remotely. Now that these days they are being forced to go remote, of course, like pandemic or not, I think maybe later also some people would move to remote working in a more permanent way, uh, trying to implement many of these principles, taking care of all the pitfalls that we have discussed would definitely help a lot of people who are setting up teams to work in a remote environment in a lean way. So once again, I think thank you so much, Nikhil, for taking this time out, sharing your experiences. Really, really appreciate it. Any last words you have before we end? Maybe you're on mute. I think I'm not able to hear you. Nikhil, were you able to catch me? I was just asking if you have any like closing statement or
Hey, so closing statement is more to do with just leaving everybody with a thought on how can we do this differently? How can we reimagine our organizational structures, our work culture, and thinking of it from a holistic
Hold on to that thought
Hold
for
on to that
a
thought for
moment.
a
There is
moment.
one question
There
that
is
has
one
come,
question that has
and I
come.
would really love for you to take this question because it's a very interesting question for me as well. Is Scrum and Agile overrated? And has it worked for you? Has it not worked for you?
Oh dear. So this is like a flame war whether Vim is better or Emacs is better or what works. So anyway, I'd say I have used Scrum. I have been in on agile teams also, and I have been non-agile also, where we did not follow any particular methodology, and we just went with our gut feeling. Um, I won't take a side. I won't be opinionated on for or against either of these. Uh, I'd say it's a very subjective choice to make based on what works for people and what doesn't work for people. So, and I really like to focus on the human aspect of human resources, where we put the individuality of our team members and the organizational components in in a human centric view, and then take a decision whether this works or that works. And it doesn't have to be like you follow the process to the T, and if it is not followed, then there is an action that needs to be taken against it. It can be a little more compassionate and more inclusive. So again, for this question, I will definitely not be someone who would take a side for or against any of these. I've used all of them, and in some context it worked. In some context it did not work. The factor that was responsible for making it or breaking it was the human aspect, where wherever there was adoption for a particular delivery model, it worked out. Where there was no adoption or no buy-in, it did not work. So what has worked for me is having a democratic process and a meritocratic process. Whenever we evaluate something, we need to evaluate what value does it add to the organization and to the end user and to our bottom line and to the business or to our customer. So it doesn't really matter what you use. I mean, the customer does not care whether you use Scrum or Agile or Vim or Emacs or Linux or Mac or Windows. Or if you deliver value in the end, that's what matters.
A really nice answer. I think I would like to share a little anecdote also along with that. Something very recently is we also, I mean, at Coding Blocks, our tech team, work from home was optionally allowed, and I think a lot of us work 2-3 days a week from home. But now that we all are just forced to work 7 days a week from home. So now we just started off with having some daily catch-ups of the tech team where like there were some 10 people in the team. Everybody gets on a board and everybody starts sharing what they have done in the day. And I started feeling that I think there are days when not everybody is being able to contribute in the exact same amount of way. Somebody has maybe spent the day for taking their parent to the hospital because the hospitals are closed everywhere these days, or somebody has been having the cooking duty at home today, right? So and then people get a lot of pressure because somebody comes up with a list of things that they have done today, somebody else who has been able to just work for 1 hour that day. And then I think we started moving on to something different. We just said that there's this chat thread, whatever you keep closing issues, you can just write those down there. And the catch up call that we would have, on the call we will just discuss challenges that any one of us is facing. And if there are like two people working on two different services, they need a new API built on the other service. So we just speak about those things. I mean, where somebody else in the team can help you with it, or something you're stuck on, you need a second opinion. Or so the call has transformed nowadays into, we come on the call and we just discuss what things we can help each other with, what is the short term next 2-3 days things we want to work on, and what problems we are kind of predicting can come up when you're working on them, and we just don't focus on what did we do today on that call. So the calls are now shorter, of course. People are wasting less time on those, and like the updates are working better with just people just sending it as and when things are getting done. They're just sending it. There's no pressure to create a long list of tasks that you have done today. So yeah, I do get your point that it's very subjective, and it differs team to team and time to time and project to project. But yeah, thanks for those answers again. And you wanted to leave a thought with the viewers, so please do that before we wrap up the session.
Yeah, so the concluding thought is to put focus on the value that we deliver, uh, whether we are remote or not remote. As long as we are able to deliver value, it should not matter how many hours we put in, when do we put those hours in, and what tools do we use. If it is focused, if the entire team is aligned with the value proposition of the organization, that is something that can really help scale this effort while working remotely. So this is a thought that I would like to leave the senior management or any CXOs with, to sort of reimagine the organizational structure and the cultural aspects, and understand that maybe micromanaging people will not work in a remote uh, culture, or maybe it can work in some cases. So it really boils down to being more vulnerable, being more human uh, to your team and to the organization, and then going ahead with it.
Thank you again, once again, so much, Nikhil, for getting on this session, answering all the calls, and a really nice thought to end this with. Let's all be more human, and for leaders, focus on value rather than hours people are spending or the number of bullet points somebody's sending. Let's focus on value, and let's transform that vision to the people who are working in our teams as well. Make them proud of the value that they're contributing to. With that, we'll just end this session. We have already overshot it with a little bit of time, but once again, anybody who asked questions on YouTube, thank you so much, and thank you, Nikhil, for all of your answers. Have a nice day, everybody. Stay safe, and stay indoors, wear masks, and wash your hands.
Thank you so much.